Welcome to Watch the Book. Today we present A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, published in 1843. The story begins with a certainty. Jacob Marley was dead. His business partner, Ebenezer Scrooge, the sole friend and mourner, had signed the register of his burial years ago. Scrooge, a tight-fisted, squeezing, covetous old sinner, never painted out old Marley's name. The firm remained Scrooge and Marley, and he answered to either name. He was a man defined by a frosty rime on his features. The cold within him froze his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, and made his thin lips blue and his voice great. On Christmas Eve, Scrooge sat in his bleak counting-house. Though it was only 3, darkness had fallen, and a dense fog poured in through every keyhole, shrouding the city. His clerk, Bob Cratchit, shivered in a dismal little cell, trying to warm himself by a fire that was a mere single coal, as Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you," cried a cheerful voice. It was Scrooge's nephew, Fred, his face ruddy and handsome from his brisk walk in the cold and fog. "Bah!" Scrooge retorted with his signature humbug. He questioned his nephew's right to be merry, being poor, only for Fred to counter by asking what right Scrooge had to be morose. Fred passionately defended Christmas as a kind, forgiving, charitable time, a time to open one's heart to fellow passengers to the grave. His words earned a small applause from Bob Cratchit. Scrooge threatened to fire his clerk for the outburst and dismissed his nephew's invitation to dine, growling good afternoon until Fred finally left, wishing him a happy new year. 2 portly gentlemen then entered, seeking a donation for the poor and destitute. They explained that at this festive time want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. Scrooge coldly inquired if the prisons and workhouses were still in operation. On hearing they were, he refused to give anything, stating he supported those establishments. If they would rather die, Scrooge callously remarked, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. He dismissed the gentleman and returned to his work. As the hour of closing arrived, Scrooge begrudgingly gave Bob Cratchit Christmas Day off, calling it a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. After a melancholy dinner in a melancholy tavern, Scrooge went home to his gloomy chambers, once owned by Marley, in a building so dreary it seemed to have lost its way. As he put his key in the lock, the large door knocker transformed before his eyes. It was not a knocker but Marley's face, with ghostly spectacles and lifeless, wide-open eyes. Though startled, Scrooge turned the key, walked in and slammed the door. He checked every room, dismissing the vision, before locking himself in for the night. Sitting by his meager fire, he glanced at a disused bell. With inexplicable dread, he saw it begin to swing softly, then ring out loudly, joined by every bell in the house. A clanking noise followed from the cellar, growing louder as it came up the stairs. Despite his fears, Scrooge muttered, "It's humbug still. I won't believe it." The heavy door opened, and a phantom passed through into the room. It was Marley's ghost, transparent and bound in a long chain made of cash boxes, keys, and ledgers. Scrooge, attempting to dismiss the specter as a product of indigestion, was horrified when the ghost removed its head bandage, letting its lower jaw drop upon its breast. Marley's ghost explained its fate: to wander the earth, fettered by a chain forged in a life of avarice, and to witness the happiness it could no longer share. Before departing, the ghost issued a solemn warning. Scrooge would be haunted by 3 spirits, a final chance to escape the same dreadful fate. The first would arrive at 1 o'clock. As the clock struck 1, a light flashed in the room, and the curtains of Scrooge's bed were drawn aside by a hand. He found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor. The figure was like a child, yet also like an old man. Its form suggested great age, yet its face was smooth and unwrinkled. From the crown of its head sprung a bright, clear jet of light. The figure introduced itself as the ghost of Christmas past. When Scrooge asked what business brought it there, the spirit declared it was for his welfare and reclamation. With a gentle but irresistible grasp, the spirit led a protesting Scrooge to the window. "Bear but a touch of my hand upon your heart," it said, and you shall be upheld." They passed through the wall and stood on a snowy country road from Scrooge's childhood. The city vanished, and Scrooge, overcome with emotion, recognized the place where he was a boy. The spirit led him to his old, dilapidated schoolhouse. Inside, a lonely boy was reading by a feeble fire. Scrooge wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he used to be. As young Scrooge read, characters from his books, Ali Baba, Robinson Crusoe, seemed to appear outside the window, a flicker of joy in his otherwise solitary existence. Seeing his younger self's joy, Scrooge felt a pang of regret. He muttered that he wished he had given something to the boy who sang a carol at his door the night before. The ghost showed him another Christmas. The school door opened and a little girl, his sister Fan, came darting in to announce she had come to bring him home for good. Fan, full of glee, explained that their father was so much kinder now. Scrooge remembered her as a delicate creature with a large heart who later died, leaving one child, his nephew. The scene shifted to a bustling city. The ghost stopped at a warehouse door, and Scrooge cried out in excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again!" The jovial Fezziwig called for the shutters to be put up, transforming the warehouse into a warm, bright ballroom for a Christmas Eve party, filled with music and dancing. Scrooge watched, his heart and soul in the scene, as his younger self and fellow apprentice Dick Wilkins celebrated with the Fezziwigs and all their employees in joyous revelry. The ghost noted how small a matter it was to make these people so grateful, but Scrooge heatedly defended Fezziwig's power to create happiness far greater than its monetary cost. As the memory faded, Scrooge felt a pang of conscience, muttering that he would like to be able to say a word or two to his clerk, Bob Cratchit, just now. The spirit showed him another scene. He was older now, in his prime. The signs of care and avarice had begun to appear in his face, a restless greed taking root in his eyes. He sat beside a fair young girl in a mourning dress, her eyes filled with tears. It was Belle, his fiancée, who told him softly that another idol had displaced her, a golden one. Belle explained that their contract was made when they were both poor and content to be so. Now, he was changed, and the promise of happiness had become fraught with misery. With a heavy heart, for the love of the man he once was, Belle released him from their engagement. She left him, and they parted, the memory of it torturing the older Scrooge. "Spirit," Scrooge cried, "show me no more, conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?" But the relentless ghost forced him to observe one final shadow. He saw a comfortable room full of tumultuous joy. It was Belle, now a comely matron, surrounded by her laughing children. Her husband then entered with Christmas presents. The husband told Belle he had passed Scrooge's office window that evening. Scrooge's partner, Marley, was near death, and there Scrooge sat quite alone in the world. "Remove me," Scrooge exclaimed, unable to bear it. He wrestled with the spirit, seized its extinguisher cap, and pressed it down over the bright light on its head. He awoke in his own bed as the clock struck 1. After waiting in a state of nervous apprehension, a ruddy light began to glow from the adjoining room, beckoning him. He entered to find his room transformed into a perfect grove, hung with living green and gleaming berries. Heaped on the floor was a throne of festive food and drink. Upon this throne sat a jolly giant, glorious to see. It introduced itself as the ghost of Christmas present, its open hand, sparkling eye, and cheery voice radiating joy. Scrooge, no longer the dogged man he had been, submissively asked the spirit to conduct him where it would, so that he might profit by the lesson he was to be taught. He touched the spirit's robe, and they were instantly transported to the city streets on Christmas morning. People were clearing snow, full of glee, and exchanging facetious snowballs. The ghost led him through bustling shops where poulterers and grocers displayed their finest goods, the very air filled with the promise and excitement of the festive day. The spirit took special interest in the poor, who carried their dinners to the bakers' shops. It sprinkled incense from its torch onto their meals, a blessing to any given kindly. The spirit led Scrooge to the threshold of his clerk's four-roomed house. There it smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with a sprinkling from its torch. Inside, Mrs. Cratchit and her children prepared for the feast. The two smallest Cratchits danced about the table, excited by the smell of the goose cooking at the baker's. Bob Cratchit arrived, his threadbare clothes brushed to look seasonable, and carrying Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. The small boy bore a little crutch and an iron frame on his limbs. The family gathered for dinner. When the goose was carved, a murmur of delight arose. There never was such a goose. Its tenderness, flavor, size, and cheapness were praised by all. After the goose came the pudding, blazing in brandy and adorned with Christmas holly. Bob declared it the greatest success Mrs. Cratchit had achieved since their marriage. After dinner, Bob proposed a toast, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us." To which Tiny Tim, the last of all, added, "God bless us, everyone." Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before, asked the spirit if Tiny Tim would live. "I see a vacant seat," the ghost replied, "and a crutch without an owner." The ghost rebuked Scrooge with his own words. If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head in penitence and grief. Bob then proposed a toast to Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. Mrs. Cratchit resisted, calling him an odious, stingy, hard man, but drank for her husband's sake. The spirit's torch cast a final, happy glow on the contented family, and Scrooge kept his eye upon them, especially on Tiny Tim, until they faded from his sight. They traveled on, visiting a lonely moor where miners sang carols, a solitary lighthouse where two keepers wished each other Merry Christmas, and a ship at sea where sailors hummed tunes. Suddenly, Scrooge found himself in his nephew's bright, dry, gleaming room. Fred was laughing heartily about Scrooge's declaration that Christmas was a humbug. Fred expressed pity for his uncle, saying that Scrooge's ill whims punished only himself. He vowed to keep giving his uncle the same chance to be kind every year. They played games, and Scrooge, forgetting himself, eagerly joined in. In a game of yes and no, the answer to the disagreeable animal was, to everyone's delight, Uncle Scrooge. As the night wore on, Scrooge noticed the ghost had grown older. From its robe the spirit brought forth two wretched children, a boy and a girl, ignorance and want. As the bell struck 12, the ghost of Christmas present vanished. In its place, Scrooge beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, approaching like a mist along the ground. It was the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Shrouded in a deep black garment, nothing was visible save one outstretched hand. Its silent, mysterious presence filled Scrooge with dread. The phantom led him to the heart of the city's change, where a group of businessmen callously discussed the death of some unnamed man, joking about a cheap funeral. The spirit then guided Scrooge to an obscure, wretched part of town. They entered a low-browed shop where old iron, rags, and bones were bought by a gray-haired rascal named Joe. A charwoman, a laundress, and an undertaker's man arrived. They had all helped themselves to the dead man's possessions, laughing about how he had frightened everyone away in life. Old Joe appraised their plunder, a few trinkets, some sheets and towels. The charwoman then presented her bundle, which contained the dead man's bed curtains and blankets. The charwoman even boasted of taking the fine shirt he was to be buried in, saying it would have been wasted. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in absolute horror. The scene changed, and Scrooge recoiled in terror. He was now beside a bare, uncurtained bed, where a ragged sheet covered the plundered body of the same wretched man. The ghost's hand pointed directly at the covered head. Scrooge longed to lift the veil and see the face, but he had no more power to do so than to dismiss the specter. Desperate, Scrooge begged the spirit to show him some person in the town who felt any emotion caused by this man's death. He needed to see some tenderness connected with a death. The ghost revealed a room where a young couple, Caroline and her husband, were relieved to hear of the man's death, as he was their merciless creditor. Their hearts were lighter. The ghost then conducted him to Bob Cratchit's house. The family was quiet, very quiet. The mother and daughters were sewing, and Peter was reading from a book. Mrs. Cratchit spoke of her eyes being weak from the candlelight, but it was clear she was hiding her tears. The color of her sewing hurt her eyes. They were mourning Tiny Tim. Bob Cratchit came home, having been to the churchyard to visit the grave. He spoke of his promise to walk there every Sunday, breaking down as he cried, "My little child!" Bob then told his family of the extraordinary kindness of Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who had met him in the street and offered his help in any way he could. "Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead." The spirit led him onward. They arrived at an iron gate leading to a churchyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced towards it, trembling with a new fear. Scrooge pleaded with the ghost, asking if these were the shadows of things that will be, or only things that may be. But the spirit remained immovable, its finger pointing. Following the finger, Scrooge crept towards the neglected gravestone and read upon it his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. He fell to his knees, crying, "Am I that man on the bed?" Clutching at the phantom's robe, he begged for mercy. "I will not be the man I must have been. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me." He vowed to honor Christmas in his heart, to live in the past, the present, and the future, and not to shut out the lessons the spirits had taught him. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. The phantom repulsed him, and then he saw an alteration in its hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled into his bedpost. He was home. The time before him was his own to make amends in. Sobbing and laughing, he declared, "I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy." If you enjoyed witnessing Scrooge's incredible journey of redemption, subscribe to Watch the Book for more narrative retellings of the world's greatest stories.